My name is Andreso Perez. This is Enforcement on Coronavirus Curfews, a look into the importance of curfews and why they need to be enforced. A project done in fulfillment of ENC1102 course requirements of spring 2021. The issue with the curfew. Throughout the course of the COVID-19 worldwide pandemic, curfews, stay-at-home orders, closures of businesses, and many other measures have been taken to minimize the spread of this deadly virus. Although many of these measures are mandatory and enforced on the regular, this is not the case for curfews in the Miami-Dade County. More and more people find that this mandate is not enforced effectively or consistently, and they take advantage of this. Many of those individuals stay out later in the night and risk catching and spreading the virus to more and more homes. The problem and solution. Through 40 survey responses given by surveyors, my research has shown that a sum of 75% of respondents believe that the curfew mandates hold little to no usefulness towards the decrease of the COVID spread. That same survey reported that 57.5% of respondents have been out doing leisurely activities like partying instead of obeying the curfew. A strong way to regulate and maintain these numbers of new cases and infections down would be for the county to enforce the curfew time limits more strictly. The method of doing this would be creating a new curfew enforcement team of the police officers and allocating new officers to this team. This will be a net cost of $31,950,000, which will be explained later in the budget. On the right here, you can see the two graphs showing the statistics. The importance of solving this problem. So why should we? Now, the answer for this would be that if this issue is not addressed by the time the entire population is vaccinated, further risk of infection and spread of the COVID-19 virus is imminent, and a further lockdown and restrictions may also come as a result. You need to think of those who are at high risk, people with asthma or blood clots, or anyone with pre-existing condition. They may not be able to take the vaccination due to any health complications that would arise if they did. It is also more efficient and practical to prevent the spread by minimizing movement and interaction between people. Research. Mitigation strategies were the first counterattack against the spread and propagation of the COVID disease. Countries desperately issued stay-at-home mandates, curfews, mask mandates, and many other countermeasures in order to slow the spread and facilitate the process of finding a cure and a vaccine. The result of an examination, as expressed through Florence Kanu's Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report, published to the CDC and written on November 6th of 2020, it shows the relationship of implementing the strategies for mitigation leading to a decline of mortality by 100%, hospitalization by 88%, and incidents, which are new cases, by 82% in the months from April to June of 2020. In these same MMWRs preceding this decline, the initial case reports were much higher and showed no sign of stoppage until the mitigation strategies were enacted, thus concluding that without preventions like curfews and stay-at-home orders, coronavirus cases and deaths would be much, much higher. Now, in a multinational global mobility data study conducted by Hakan Yilmazgade, as published in the Journal of Human Behavior in the Social Environment of January 4th, 2021, author Yilmazgade discovered that a weekly 1% increase in people staying at home and being less mobile resulted in 70 fewer weekly COVID cases and 7 weekly less COVID deaths. This can be directly linked to the stay-at-home mandates and curfew mandates that were issued shortly after in the countries to decrease infectivity and reducing the spread of COVID. Similar numbers could be seen if enforcement on curfews and other mandates of the like would heighten and be penalized more often. In another MMWR written by Ariel Lazary and published to the CDC on April 13th of 2020, author Lazary adds onto the aforementioned notion of mitigation strategies with, when a novel virus with pandemic potential emerges, community mitigation strategies often are the most readily available interventions to slow transmission. With this MMWR and Kanu's MMWR taken into account, tighter restrictions and enforcement should follow these mitigation strategy mandates to further lower the number of COVID deaths and cases from careless individuals going around spreading the virus. This could also be modeled onto the County of Miami-Dade to further lower infectivity rates. More research. From the survey I conducted, respondents were asked to answer an open-ended question. The question goes as follows. What other measures would you suggest to counteract the spread? Some of their responses were: follow procedures to prevent COVID-19 spread and make sure people follow precautions listed, stay 6 feet apart, wear a mask, and make sure to constantly wash your hands. Also, if you're sick, stay at home to prevent spreading or worsening your sickness and seek help. Further enforcing curfew, social distancing, and wearing of masks, that would do wonders. We wear them, but most people don't really care or don't wear them at all, and that has to change. That could change with further enforcement. Another answer was enforcing the 6 feet apart rule and punishment for those who do not follow guidelines. As you can see, most people believe that further enforcement would be great. But on the contrary, it is also seen here, they were asked whether they believed that the curfew was a necessary countermeasure to decreasing the spread and lowering the curve. Now, if you consider responses 3 and below as little to no usefulness, that would account as 75% of the respondents believing that curfews have little to no impact on the spread of the COVID-19 virus, therefore they would not obey such mandates. This arose to the issue of law enforcement and how serious the population takes COVID-19 regulations. Now for the plan of action and its budget. So, a minimum of 1,000 police officers will be allocated to deal with the stricter enforcement of the curfew. The average pay for a police officer in Miami is around $50,000 a year, and accounting for that, the budget will be around $10 million for police personnel. Another cost would be the resources given to those officers. Items in this category would entail firearms, radios, uniforms, handcuffs, an expected $250,000. Training tuition for each officer is an additional $6.7 million, and 500 patrol cars carrying 2 officers each are expected to be $30,000 per unit, reaching a sum of $15 million. The template used for making sure costs are spent adequately and accordingly will follow a similar model to the one seen on the right. This is a cost-effectiveness model used by other state governments around the US to make sure crimes and misdemeanors are enforced efficiently according to the costs that were made to allocate that force. The cost would total to $31,950,000 needed for this plan to be enacted. The source of this would be proposed to the local government, something like the City of Miami-Dade, and advocation for funding from the city and local fundraising events will be held. Separate fundraising on the website GoFundMe will be made to allocate money faster and more efficiently to make this measure attainable. The funds from GoFundMe will be donated directly to the South Florida Community Development Coalition as a sponsor to manage and cover these costs. The link to the fundraiser I made will be in the description of this video. On the right, you can see our goal, where to share it, where to donate, and where the fundraiser is, and a little explanation that I gave on the website as well. The timeline. Once this proposal is approved in May of 2021, during the following months, lobbying will be done for legislators and those in government positions to approve the funding of this proposal, which is expected to be around August of 2021. Once that is done, approval for the budget idea and further verification for the plan will be made with local authorities and public figures. And once passed and funded in December, the finished plan will go into fruition by setting up hiring advertisements for the 1,000 police officers needed for the curfew enforcement unit. These officers will be in training for approximately 4 months and will be seen in action expectedly in February of 2022. An opposing viewpoint. Now, one could say a more practical solution is to just administer more vaccines and lessen enforcement altogether, since it's a misallocation of police resources. On the contrary, though, considering how many more cases have gone up, the more people have been more mobile in the past, and more vaccination gives more leeway. More leeway is a bigger window for opportunity for the virus to hit a second time. Those 2 weeks of gestation period that come right after getting administered a vaccine were completely ignored in the 2021 spring break incident that happened this past March in Miami Beach. A bunch of people from Atlanta and other cities came to Miami during the spring break after they had gotten their vaccine and came to Miami Beach and wreaked havoc. During this, an emergency curfew mandate was issued from 8 p.m. to 5 a.m. due to the influx of people partying and going crazy right after their vaccination during the spring break. Now, with this said, if all else fails, like the advocation, lobbying, fundraising, or if the plan just doesn't work and the resources cannot be met, an alternative for it will be used in place. Using already existing resources and selecting 1,000 police officers in a similar way that are already deployed, and equipment like the guns, handcuffs, and the cars will be used alongside other existing resources to fulfill the requirements to make the plan happen and work just as a substitute. The cost here would be very marginal and very efficient since these are already being paid for by the state and new things don't have to be allocated. The only expenses coming from this alternative plan would be to pay for the separate training that they may need in this unit. Now, what I ask from you is that I urge you for this plan to be passed and maybe even the alternative plan to be considered as a countermeasure towards the COVID spread on top of vaccinations being administered, not to stop vaccinations or anything of the like. A joint operation of both adequate vaccine distribution and proper enforcement of curfews and the population will lead to a faster COVID-free environment in Miami-Dade. Let's help flatten the curve, Miami. The link, once again, will be in the video description. Let's help flatten that curve. Here are my references. Thank you.